Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master, Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Welcome to Window on the West, where we explore all the ages of Tolkien's Middle-earth, with your hosts, Jonathan Watson, Michael Grumbine, and Dan Coates.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We are on to episode 27 of Window on the West. I'm here. My name is Jonathan. I'm here along with Michael, my co-host in the Carolinas, and Dan, my co-host in California.
Hey.
I can't think of any other sea states right now because I'm not in one. However, yeah, it's good to have you along. This is now the second half, or the second third of Beren and Luthien. And we're going to go one more after this, so that'll be 4 full episodes on Beren and Luthien. I think we're giving it the due it deserves and the amount of time that we're spending on it. I'm certainly coming across new things. I think I spent more time looking at the song of the contest between Sauron and Felagund when I read through it this time around, and really spent a lot of time kind of reading into it and like what was meant by it. I really enjoyed that part. But before we get into that, we're going to have an extended podcast today. We're going to go over some questions from our supporters, and we're going to look at a few things in that. So I hope you join us there. It's $4 a month. The first month is free, but we're going to look at things like there are similarities between the Silmarils and the One Ring, and let's talk about those and how Feanor made the Silmarils and how Sauron made the One Ring. And then we're also going to look at since Tolkien was a philologist, and there are instances where his characters aren't necessarily precise with their words, and certain turns of phrase find a more import than we might initially think, both in Éowyn saying like "I am no man," and where Sauron is like in this episode where the greatest wolf that ever lived, but he's not actually the greatest wolf that ever lived. We find out. So anyway, that's we're going to kind of dive deep into some of those thoughts there, and why maybe Tolkien looked at some of that as a philologist. So I hope you join us there. Go to theonering.com/patron. It's $4 a month. First month is free. Or if you can be like one of our supporters, like Adam and Lynn and Chook, who give us a little bit more so we can do more of this here at $20 a month. But they're our supporters, and we really thank them for that.
We have the best supporters.
We do. And the best supporters in our Discord chat. So join up. You can join us in Discord. You can ask questions there. We interact with you guys and answer questions and do about a monthly video chat when we open up the chat room to everybody. Sorry about that. This month we just didn't actually properly promote it to everybody. But anyway, join us there, theonering.com/patron. So, Dan, we're going to start today without All That Is Gold Does Not Glitter, because I think we have a lot to go into. So we're going to start right away with
Dan's Big Thought.
I can't get over that intro. It's just so horrifying. So my big thought this week, I think we've mentioned this many times on the podcast before, but it seems like for Tolkien, song is woven into everything. It's woven into creation itself with the Ainulindale. Song is everything. Song is life. The spirit of all these creatures that he's made is woven up with song. And in this chapter, you have like the epic rap battle showdown of Middle Earth between Finrod and Sauron, and they're basically going back and forth, and it's almost like a battle of wills through song. And something that I've also been thinking about, and in this chapter, there's other songs too. Beren is always singing, and he's trying to focus on the light. His songs seem to be connected to the stars and to light. And Luthien is singing, and it reminds Beren of nightingales, and just kind of like the softness of the world, the beauty that's in the world. So there's a deep connection for Tolkien with song and kind of like the life-giving aspects of his stories. And so we could probably spend a whole hour just talking about the different songs that there are in this chapter. It does remind me of some of the other reading I've been doing with Lord of the Rings. Like anytime Tolkien stops and spends a whole page or two developing a song, I think for him, that means this is something that's really important, and I'm going to stop whatever we're doing with the narrative, and we're going to stop and we're going to think about how important this is. And you notice that in the Bible too. I was just reading through Judges, and there's Judges chapter 5 is the Song of Deborah. And normally I just blow through that chapter because I'm just like, whatever, why are they singing? Get back to the battles, get back to the next judge who saves Israel or whatever. But this time I stopped when I read it, and I'm like, there's something about this where, like, for some reason, the Bible's stopping for this whole chapter to do this song. And I'm wondering what is so special about this moment that we have to stop and sing about it. And it made me stop and think.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. There's that famous phrase from the Bible that he who sings prays twice. And there's something about song in the human condition where harmony, putting words to harmony, adds an element. In Tolkien, I agree with you, Dan, it adds the element of life-givingness, it adds the element of power, it adds the element of all sorts of, peace and light, it adds the element of darkness and concealment. Songs have a potency beyond merely the words that we use. So when we put words to song, they gain in power. And Tolkien, I think, is latching onto that really, really firmly.
Yeah, it makes me actually think about something I read in Andrew Klavan's book, Truth and Beauty, where art is sort of like it's the melding of the importance of the physical and the importance of the spiritual into something that is somehow representative. And a song is kind of like that. It's more than just notes, right? There's something of the soul in it in a beautiful song. Like you can have AI create song, and like it all sort of loses itself. But when there is the injection of the person, in the same way that Feanor injects himself into the Silmarils, right? The song becomes more than just notes. It becomes more than just words. Together in the beauty of the person singing it, of the words that are said, of the melody or the rhythm, right? There's something deeper about it. And I think Tolkien does capture that. I think you're right. Yeah, and so what's funny, I don't know if this is funny or not, but it makes for a great approach to this, is that it's the song that they sing about the songs between Sauron and Felagund. So we start the chapter off with Felagund and Beren leaving Nargothrond, coming up on the orcs, taking on the shapes of the orcs in a very magical kind of way. I accept that.
Today, Jonathan accepts magic.
We draw the line at walking on snow, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No one can walk on snow.
But see, that's the problem. It's like really, you can grow your hair, but you can't walk on snow. Okay.
All right, I'm sorry. Okay, I stand completely. So they come up north. They end up going to Tar Nafuin, and Sauron is aware of them and sent to waylay them, right? And thus befell, this is where how Tolkien writes it to start. Thus befell the contest of Sauron and Felagund, which is renowned, and we hear renowned a couple times actually in this part of the chapter. For Felagund strove with Sauron in songs of power, and the power of the king was very great, but Sauron had the mastery, as is told in the Lay of Luthien, and then we get into essentially the song or the poem of the Lay of Luthien. And I have a few thoughts about this. What did you guys think about reading through that Lay of Luthien and the way that he structures it? I found interesting because he moves into the idea of talking of sort of a narrative form of like what they did, like piercing, opening, treachery, revealing, uncovering, betraying. Then suddenly Felagund sat there swaying. But it moves into this. That's the first third of it. The second third of it is an approach to what Felagund was saying, where his songs talk about Valinor, the magic and might he brought of elveness into his words. They heard the birds singing afar in Nargothrond, the sighing of the sea beyond. Right, this is in Felagund's song, the beautiful things that he's bringing up, and then beyond the western world, on sand of pearls and elven land, and then it moves into this is the next thing is what Sauron in his combative song against Felagund is saying. And Tolkien writes, then the gloom gathered, darkness growing, in Valinor the red blood flowing. So Felagund singing "Beyond the Western World on sand of pearls in Elvenland," and then Sauron takes it and converts it to "In Valinor, the red blood flowing beside the sea on the sand, where the Noldor slew the foam riders and stealing drew their white ships and their white sails." So he's reminding him of like, yeah, sure, it was beautiful, it was great, look at all this wonderful things that you did, and then you killed them all, and then you fled, and then you went over the ice, and now we have your captives in Angband. And so the song goes from like, this is them fighting, this is what Felagund did, and then Sauron gets the mastery because he reminds him that the beauty and the wonder of Valinor was ruined by the Noldor like you. And that's sort of like, to me, that's how he wins the battle. It's like,
right. It is. It's so fascinating. This song of a song, a song of a battle of two songs, really is what it is. Because I agree with you. That transition. There are kind of two transition points in the song. There's first. So we're first introduced in the song in the first few lines to Sauron's song, a song of wizardry, piercing, opening, treachery, revealing, uncovering, betraying. And then Felagund responds, and it almost seems like every time there's a response, you have to, like, it's almost like there are rules to this song battle, you know, kind of like 8 Mile, the movie. I'm just kidding. Terrible. So there are rules, and the rule is you have to kind of take what was given to you and have a response, which is not a total non sequitur. You have to connect it. So connecting Sauron's song of piercing, of opening, Felagund or Finrod sings an answer, a power of staying, resisting, secrets kept, strength like a tower, trust unbroken, freedom. So he's matching Sauron's, he's connecting his song to Sauron's song. It's not just like a totally different song, like, no, we're disguised, think orc thoughts, orc song. Yeah, because that's what they're supposed to look like. He's responding to Sauron's song. And then he adds, after responding with the song basically of staying, he then brings in all this beauty and the power of Valinor. And like you said then, Jonathan, Sauron responds to that by using the beauty and power of Valinor to then connect it to the betrayal of the Noldor and remind him of all the terrible things that happened in Valinor, ending with the Helcaraxe. And so the ice, literally a song of ice.
And some fire.
And some fire. Yes. And after the fire, the song ends and Sauron wins. So Sauron has the better of this song. But the fact that Finrod can actually go toe-to-toe with the greatest Maiar to be corrupted by Morgoth is pretty impressive.
Does that say more about Finrod, or does that say more about Sauron?
What do you mean?
I mean,
I think I know what you mean. But
is Sauron as powerful as we really think he is, or is it the fear that he injects in people that makes him more powerful? Is Finrod stronger than we might think he is by being able to go toe to toe against Sauron? But I mean, in the same way, you could say Aragorn, in a sense, right? He was the one able to resist in the Palantir by facing up against Sauron by looking into it and not being brought under the sway of it like Denethor was.
The difference is that Aragorn had the Palantir by birthright, so there was an authority he had over it that gave him a balancing of the scale, so to speak. I would argue, right. But I was always impressed when I read this passage about Finrod. But you might be right, because Sauron is defeated he's defeated twice in this chapter, or this part of the chapter. And so it is interesting. Maybe he's not as cool as we think he is.
I don't have an answer. It was just a thought.
So I'm curious. I think I kind of touched on it with the big thought, but I guess I'm just trying to like ruminate about it. Like, why do you think Tolkien has them duke it out with songs? Like, why are they fighting with songs? Like, wouldn't Sauron just like grab a sword and just start stabbing him? Or like, wouldn't he just use brute force to get what he wants or to figure out what's going on? He's trying to like interrogate them and figure out who they are and what they're doing, and he's got them imprisoned. Why wouldn't he just? I know he resorts to letting the werewolves start eating some of them.
Well, at this point, they're not imprisoned. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're just before him. They've been brought before him. They're not in prison. But that doesn't change the fact that it's a good question, because I wondered that too when I was first reading this. Is like, why doesn't he just strip away their disguises? Well, it turns out he kind of has to win in the battle of power before he can strip their disguises, right? Because it says and Finrod fell before the throne. Then Sauron stripped from them their disguise, and they stood before him naked and afraid. So it's almost like the power that Finrod has put forth in cloaking them in some way prevents them from being just manhandled in that regard, or at least in a way. And I also think maybe it's just Sauron's preference. Like Sauron is he is a wizard of type. He likes the use of putting forth his power in the art that we call magic, and in Middle Earth, and so he's done it in a variety of ways, and he continues to do it through here. So maybe this is just his preferred method. Maybe this is his sword, Dan. Maybe that's what he prefers to use rather than a sword.
I think also, like you were saying, like when we talk about Sauron, there's always an adjective to how he treats people. So he put Gorlim cruelly to death, right? It didn't he just put him to death. He put him cruelly to death. So I think the idea of belittling, of making smaller those around him because he sought to gather as much power as possible, and only by defeating Finrod in this way would he be able to take his power away from him too.
Yeah, bring him low.
Bring him low. Yeah,
I think that's right. Yeah, the other last thing I'll say about this particular song is that what this really called back to me too was the song of creation in the Ainulindalë. So in that song, Iluvatar, there's all these levels in that song, and Iluvatar's themes, they call them. And in this third theme, where the children of Iluvatar come in, that's the elves and men, that theme has the ability to rise above evil and discord. So the discordant song of Melkor in the Ainulindalë is defeated in a way similar to the way Finrod responds to Sauron's song in this passage, where he matches it and then builds into something beautiful. And then Sauron comes in again and tries to overtop him. In this case, he succeeds. In the case of the Song of Creation, Melkor does not ultimately succeed because Iluvatar takes the handle ultimately. But there is that tendency to sort of like crescendos, like fighting crescendos in the music. One of discord, one of beauty and joy.
It's like the Middle Earth version of dueling banjos.
That's right.
Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry, I apologize. All right, so after this here, what he does is he throws them into a deep, dark pit, dark and silent, and threatened again to slay them cruelly, because he put everybody, he's cruelly is a favorite part of.
And he's pretty good at cruel, because he sends a werewolf to devour them one at a time. That's not very straightforward or efficient. That's just pretty much torture.
Cruel. Yeah, and fearful, right? Not just cruel, but he's trying to inject fear into every single person in that pit in order to figure out, like, why was Finrod there? Why was Finrod assailing them? He didn't actually know they were on a quest for the Silmarils at this point.
No, he doesn't. And also, a side note: 12 is the size of fellowships in the Silmarillion, where 9 is the size of fellowships in the Lord of the Rings. We had the 12. The Bearhair's band of 12, and now Felagund's band of 12 as well. Soon to be 2, but yeah.
Is there a reason for that you know of, other than
No. I'm just commenting. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
I was just noticed.
So they're there. All but 2 are devoured. We learn, but at this point we move on into where Luthien is.
Or Rapunzel, as we might know her.
I think, honestly, I will say the first time I read this, I kind of did a double take, years ago, a couple decades ago. I was like, wait, what? So was he really inspired by Rapunzel to write this? Is that where it came from?
I think Tolkien doesn't have a problem with that. Like nowadays, you've seen it as like people have written whole books about Tolkien wasn't really that original. He took from all these different sources. They have like 26 different mythologies, and Tolkien would be fine with that. It'd be like, absolutely. So yeah, we have this old tale about a princess with a grown hair. You know why we have that tale about a princess with her hair grown real long? Because here's the real source of that tale was Luthien. So he's writing a prehistory. That's what he does, a prehistory historical fairy tale.
I think for those who consider it like a little kid's fairy tale, the first time you read it, it comes across as like, I was not expecting that. Whereas like Numenor, you realize, it's kind of the story of Atlantis in a way.
It is.
but Atlantis is a great grand story, right? That was written by Greek. Who wrote it? Anyway,
it came up in Socrates with Socrates and Plato.
Yeah.
Plato first. That's the first mention we have.
Yes, and so, but in this here it was kind of interesting. So she is put into a high tree that has 3 trunks that are smooth. She makes her hair grow. She gets a cloak. She escapes. And look, the feminists should be happy with her because she is not a passive victim. She, in fact, grows her hair to use to make her escape. Her hair isn't just a random factor of her life like a Tangled or Rapunzel, but is in fact That's a good point.
It's used. It's a tool. She uses her hair in 2 ways. She grows it long, then she no doubt cuts it because the 2 ways she uses it requires cutting. So she cuts her hair and then weaves it into a cloak to hide her beauty, because of course this is it's not just a good thing, but it's an unfortunate good thing with Luthien, is that she's so beautiful that everywhere she goes she cannot help but be noticed. So she crafts a magical cloak that hides all of her beauty,
and then invisibility, as it were.
Yeah, one wonders. It is kind of like invisibility because she disappears as a shadow. So
right,
yeah. And then there's she uses it to weave a rope, with a sleep spell on the end of it. All 8th level D&D wizards will be proud of this moment. Magic users will be proud of this moment. And
she has soaked it in melatonin.
Right. And I call this enchantment melatonin.
Oh man! So the story, right? The better story of Rapunzel, I think, because it's Tolkien. It has to be better. But she goes out. She meets Celegorm and Curufin,
our favorite villains. Yeah,
newly gone from. Well, actually, no. At this point, they're not gone from Nargothrond.
No. They haven't been vanished.
They're just on a hunt, right? They haven't been pushed out yet. Yes.
And why are they on a hunt? Because wolves. Because they're smart. So wolves have been in the valleys and everywhere around, and they think, and it says explicitly, they think, oh, this is probably a sign that Felagund is out there. This is probably the wolves are after Felagund. So we're going to go wolf hunting to see if we can find news of Finrod.
Wolf hunting.
Yeah, that's right.
Like maybe they'll bring home something else or bury something else.
And Celegorm and Curufin haven't learned one of those. It's like the classic blunders. It's like if you decided to be a villain and you're gonna go out and do villainous things, don't bring a Hound of Arome with you.
Yeah,
it doesn't end well for you. I mean, it starts out all right because Huan, the Hound of Arome, it finds Luthien, and he cannot be fooled by enchantment. Even Luthien's enchantments have no effect on him. So he finds her and carries her or something, leads her back to them. Probably not by force, because she appears to think that she's in the presence of friendlies once she meets them and sees princes of the Noldor.
So let's talk about Huan a little bit, and I want to know, because a couple things. Is Huan more like a Balrog in a sense that he is a spirit that's inhabiting a beast? Because he has certain abilities, right? He's a beast of Valinor in a way, right? He's a Hound of Valinor. So there's something about him that's greater than a Hound of Beleriand. So that's one thing to ask. But I also want to know, Dan, first time you read this here, since you read it recently, what was your, like, after reading Huan and you're like, wait, he's going to talk 3 times? Or what is this about? Like, how did you respond to that? What did you think about it as you were reading this part?
Yeah, my initial reaction to this whole story of Beren and Luthien was that it doesn't read to me initially like Tolkien. It kind of takes me aback because like there's all this magic. It's like you said, there's this Rapunzel type character. Now there's a dog that talks. Later on, we find out that they weave this magic and they're able to like disguise themselves as like bats and like a wolf, like a werewolf. There's werewolves. When I got through this chapter, it was like, it doesn't seem like Tolkien in some ways. It seems too fantastical. Whereas I think before, when I've read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, it seems like there are elements of what you might call magic. Like obviously Gandalf is a wizard, but it seems like he ties everything into like kind of like not a natural explanation, but like tied into being grounded into nature. Like I think he describes the hobbits as being magical in a sense that they are kind of the earth, and so they're very that they're able to like hide really easily. And so when the big stupid people come walking by, the hobbits are able to like scatter and be able to hide very easily. So it doesn't strike me as like this. I don't know, like this of all the things that I've read from Tolkien, this is like the most fairy tale feeling.
I would agree 100%. I think as we've moved through Silmarillion, we've gotten different kinds of literature in different pieces of the Silmarillion. You have creation story literature in the beginning. You have narrative history literature. You have tragedy. You have tragic literature where you're telling a tale of woe and corruption and fall. You have geography, like a whole chapter of geographic literature, if you want to call it that. And now what we clearly have here is a fairy story. We have fairy tales. This is a fairy tale, and it's a fairy tale combined with Romeo and Juliet. It's a love story with full of fairy tales. And but woven in, he's already got these tragic heroes and villains in the Noldor and the various Noldor. And I mean, in this story, we have some of the great act of self-sacrifice by Finrod and the great acts of villainy by the two Noldor, Celegorm and Curufin. They're both Noldor, so these are coming from these tragic figures he's told us so much about. But you're right, there's so many elements of just straight up fairy tale in this section. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I don't like it as much as other stories, because it feels differently fantastical. Right. It doesn't hit me the same way that like the story of Turin. I mean, to go from this to like the story of Turin is pretty dramatic, or even the fall of Gondolin.
Yep. And it is. It feels to me like this is an earlier version of his world, and he almost refines his stories more as he goes on, and his treatment of magic is definitely different. There's no getting away from the fact that there's magic everywhere in this, but the treatment of magic is refined, is made more subtle, is made more a part of the nature of things rather than overt acts of. He straight up calls them wizardry and enchantment. He baldly in this chapter. However, there's one instance of the use of magic here which he retains, and he retains in parallel exactly. And when we come to it, I'll talk about it. He retains in parallel exactly in the Lord of the Rings is what I mean. So when we get there, I'll talk about it.
Okay. Well, so she meets. So moving on, then she meets Celegorm, Curufin. They take her back to Nargothrond. They imprison, like under the guise of being helpful to her, of wanting. They don't let on that they know what quest she is on, because she's told them about Beren and him going on a quest, and so they're completely ignoring, or they pretend not to understand. But when they get to Nargothrond, they imprison her. They take away her cloak. And I think this is the line that got to me, because I think last week we talked a little bit about like what are the goals of Celegorm and Curufin, and one of the things that I thought about is like, well, maybe they're there to gather just as much power as they can to themselves, and I think this is where Tolkien
Jonathan wins on this
kind of says that. Yeah, I didn't realize that, because it was remembering by osmosis. I'd read it enough times to just sort of probably not know the exact quote, but this line here that Tolkien wrote. That Celegorm and Curufin did not purpose to seek the Silmarils by craft or war, or so them going on a quest was completely out of their mind. They're like, there's no way we're going to assault Morgoth. Like, you nuts? No way. They said, or to suffer any others to do so until they had all the might of the elf kingdoms under their hands. So their goal was to gather as much power as they possibly could before assaulting Morgoth and getting the Silmarils.
Yes, and in the line before that it says, thus they would advance their power and become the mightiest of the princes of the Noldor. So it's straight up a power grab. They're all about the power, even less than, and that speaks a little bit to what you were saying last week, Dan, about how they almost seem to sort of, even though they're the only ones that took the direct vow to seek the Silmarils until their death, these princes of the Noldor, they seem not peculiarly, but they seem rather unaffected by the need to go out and find the Silmarils. And they can seek power first, which is what they do.
Yeah, and they still had all the people like Fëanor, right? They were able to sway all the people in Nargothrond under their auspices, under their hearts, right? Swayed the hearts of the people of Nargothrond.
Right, and they keep referring in this story. We keep referring to their power over the people, which will soon be broken, and the evil that they do will become evident, and that even their influence will not avail them at that point. But I think we also have here, on a side note, the first reference, at least that I remember, to wolf riders, right?
Yes.
It says, and this is after Huan breaks from his loyalty to his master Celegorm.
He was not swayed by Celegorm and Cruffin's.
Correct. Turns out your power to sway has no effect on a wolfhound of Arome. So he frees her, and he said, and it says, then he led her by secret ways out of Nargothrond, and they fled north together, and he humbled his pride and suffered her to ride upon him in the fashion of a steed, even as the orcs did at times upon great wolves. So I thought that. So Huan is given a lot of dignity here. Interestingly, for all of his similarities to a Narnian animal, and no doubt that's why one of the reasons that I would be irritable if I was Tolkien and C.S. Lewis walks in with his manuscript of talking dogs, is
talking dogs and talking horses and talking
talking everything.
Talking everything. Yeah.
You can almost imagine Tolkien like interlineating this point about he only spoke 3 times in his life. He's like, my dog isn't going to do that. But who knows when he wrote that? But he really does have a lot of dignity and power. He's sort of this, and he has loyalty to Celegorm even after Celegorm turns out to be a villain. So he has these dog-like qualities still, right? So dogs are always loyal to their masters, even if their masters turn out to be cads. And so,
to say the least,
yeah. And in this case, he obviously has a mind of his own as well, and keeps saving them. So he takes Luthien to the Isle, and thus begins another series of songs of battle.
Not before, though, Finrod is slain by the werewolf that has slain the 11 others. I love that Tolkien writes he slew it with his hands and teeth. It was like he was not fighting nice.
No. Well, I mean, he had nothing. You have your teeth. Turns out elven teeth are pretty strong.
It's interesting. It's interesting to me that they set off with 12 total, and that means that they have watched 10 of the companions be eaten by werewolves. But when Beren is about to be eaten, he just like rips off his shackles and just manhandles this werewolf. It's like
he holds out.
His commitment to his oath is so much more than even his commitment to his own kin or his own blood, his own people as their king. It's very interesting to me.
And you got to imagine, like, if Sauron's going to put people in chains in a dungeon, he's not going to half-ass the job. He's going to, I mean, this is not some campy villain that's going to be easily like, oh, your chains are weak. So the fact that Finrod's able to burst his shackles is, I think it says exactly that he put forth his power, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And burst his bonds.
Put forth all his power and burst his bonds. So another example of the inward power being able to break what we would call laws of nature outwardly, in that sense, in a way that men would consider magical.
It was his one rep max. Talking about exercise, yeah.
But Luthien came too late because she was standing on the bridge that led to Sauron's island, and she sang a song that no walls of stone could hinder. And then Beren answered. His
song is a song of praise of the sickle of Varda, the 7 stars that are in the heavens. And then he passes out. That was it. So it turns out Beren has the power, has an ability to sing songs of some power anyway, because it can be heard from the pits and underneath, so she can hear him. So, but not much power. He's not the song master. And but Luthien hears him, and it says, but Luthien heard his answering voice, and she sang then a song of greater power. The wolves howled, and the isle trembled. So her song is making the isle shake. So that's the power of an earthquake of a sort.
So if we thought, like at this point, if we thought Finrod was strong,
yeah,
right? Luthien comes, and the entire island can't stand her.
Now, but this doesn't scare Sauron. He smiles because he recognizes this is Luthien, and I can capture her and give her to Morgoth. What a great prize! How great will my reward be? And so, funny parallel to what happened recently, where you had 12 captives and one werewolf, and the werewolf slowly eats its way through every captive until finally the second to last captive slays it and is slain by it. This time, Sauron sends werewolf after werewolf, one at a time. This one, like a campy villain, like, I know, we'll send one guy. And Huan takes him out. All right, we'll send one more. Yeah. And down they come, and like a video game, Huan eats them all. So, and what's funny to me is Sauron knows it. He knows it's Huan because it references the fact that he knows that Huan is going to die from a wolf, can be killed by a wolf. So he's like, oh, so this is Huan. So maybe I can become a wolf and take Huan down.
But he can't, because he's not actually a wolf. He's still Sauron. He's just a fake wolf. He's just pretending to put it all on. So he's not.
So that's the question, though. Now let me ask you: do you think that I think he has the form of a wolf, like he's actually physically a wolf?
Yes, but we know that he is not the greatest wolf to have ever lived at that point.
Correct.
And the question is, does that, in the same way that Eowyn said, "I am no man," is he no wolf? So. We can talk about the extended podcast.
Are you trying to say that Sauron is trans?
Look, in that moment, there is no doubt that he identifies as a wolf.
Oh my gosh!
He's not.
So what you're saying?
He's a furry. So
no. Okay. He's a furry with teeth.
Oh my goodness. This is awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is one of those fantastical elements of the story that when you read it at first glance, it hits you like this doesn't seem like Tolkien, because you have like a person who can shapeshift into all these different things, and that doesn't seem like what we were talking about. The magic doesn't seem rooted to like just nature or being connected to nature. It's like he's able to change nature to what he wants it to be.
Well, that's right. Well, but he's a Maiar, right? So he could still has some ability to change his physical form. At least he seems to have it. Now, what's weird about that is it says that basically Morgoth got locked into his form. So one imagines that Sauron has to get locked into his form at some point by exerting his power as well. But it does seem interesting that Tolkien in Lord of the Rings has almost. Is there an instance in Lord of the Rings? I cannot think of one, but is there an instance in which there is some effect, art, magic? I'm not talking about the salmon. Frodo dressing up as orcs in orc clothing. I'm talking about where an art of illusion of some kind or enchantment is used, so a thing appears to be something different than what it is.
I mean, the only thing that you have that I would say that approaches that is what the One Ring does, is it turns you invisible.
Sure, but it doesn't give you a new form, does it?
What about the cloaks that they get in Lothlorien? Doesn't that kind of turn them semi-invisible? But even then, it seems like it's like really good camouflage or something.
Yeah, it hides them from view. It doesn't change
their form.
Doesn't change their form.
Right.
And what we have here is just a plethora of form changes. Like Sauron has an illusion with Gorlim the Unhappy that he crafts to fool Gorlim, and then you have people changing their form all over the place in this story, like 6 or 7 times. Through illusion, like Finrod changes, he has some kind of power. It's magic. It's not like, here I bought 10 pounds of face paint with me. Now we all look like orcs.
I went to the Halloween store and brought some makeup. Right.
Prosthetics. Would you believe rubber? I know you've never heard of it, but sure. But so there's clearly Tolkien clearly refines his use of magic from this tale to Lord of the Rings, but there's one place it is not, and this is the place. We've reached it. So, well, almost. So Sauron comes out, and at first he cows Huan for a second because he comes with great dread. And to speak to your earlier point, Jonathan, yes, I think so much of the power of Sauron is in fear. Like we see that all throughout Lord of the Rings, but also here, and he has the power to cow Huan for a second, and he leaps upon Luthien. Luthien basically is faints, I think. Basically, she said, even as came, she cast a fold. She swooned before the menace of the fell spirit in his eyes and the foul vapor of his breath. And even as she came falling, she cast a fold of her dark cloak before his eyes, and he stumbled, for a fleeting drowsiness came upon him. Then Huan sprang. So Huan recovers, comes at him, and there's this great battle now between Wolf, and I'm quoting, Wolf Sauron is the name of it. There befell
Sauron.
the battle of Huan and Wolf Sauron. So it's not just anime that can just hyphenate things to make them the name of a character.
And Sauron didn't just stay as a wolf, right? We were talking about this. He changes from a wolf to a serpent, and from monster to his own accustomed form. But he could not elude the grip of Huan without forsaking his body utterly. And I love that Luthien comes up to him, kind of. I feel like she kind of walks up to him, just kind of looks at him, and goes, "Mm-hmm. Right. So you have a choice now to make."
Yes.
And I love how she's like, you want to go back to Morgoth and like endure his scorn and wrath
forever.
Eternity?
In other words, she tells him that she can actually strip him of his body permanently, which that's power right there. And so Sauron, and she says, yield to me this entire tower and this island, or this is what's going to happen to you. So Sauron yields. And here's where I was talking about. And Luthien took mastery of the isle and all that was there, and Huan released him. That's Sauron. And immediately he took the form of a vampire, great as a dark cloud across the moon, and he fled, dripping blood from his throat upon the trees, and came to Tower Nu Fuin, and dwelt there, filling with horror. So what's interesting there is, too, Tolkien is directly referencing the early Bohemian legends about vampires, which is not that they actually had blood bleeding from the reason they had to drink blood all the time, wanted blood, was because they were continually losing it from their throat. So they had to drink blood.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Interesting.
I didn't know that.
Anyway, now the part I was going to reference. Then Luthien stood upon the bridge and declared her power, and the spell was loosed that bound stone to stone, and the gates were thrown down, and the walls opened, and the pits laid bare, and many thralls and captives came forth in wonder and dismay, shielding their eyes against the pale moonlight, for they had lain long in the darkness of Sauron. That passage, if you now go to the appendices, which I did not bring up before me and I should have, but if you go to the appendices and you read the description of Galadriel throwing down the walls of Dol Guldur and laying the pits bare, there's a direct parallel there. So here's the power of, and so I have to imagine, although he doesn't say it in the appendices, to be consistent, and Tolkien was generally consistent, I have to imagine that he thought of Galadriel singing a song of power and bringing down the walls of Dol Guldur and laying the pits bare. So he did keep some of the power of magic into the Lord of the Rings for certain very rare instances, but not the whole fairy tale-ish aspect of it.
I had never thought about that. That is a really neat parallel. Huh. Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Maybe that makes sense. I hadn't, right, because they're both Noldor, and, well, she's not Noldor, but they're both elves, and they have that power. Huh. I like that. So at this point, they bury Felagund on the hilltop. He comes out of the pits of despair. They bury Felagund, and the
wait. Don't you mean she then gives Felagund's body to Galadriel to weep over for the next 1,000 years? Because that's what I saw in the Rings of Power.
Stop it.
Yeah.
If we
Sauron took time to cut a map onto his.
If we could back up slightly and try to ignore the Rings of Power for a second, it's interesting to me that what Sauron is afraid of is that he's kind of like a Pac-Man ghost. Is that if he gets eaten, he loses his little body and he goes back into like the little holding cell,
like eyeballs.
Yeah, so he's just and is that what happens in the between the Second Age and the Third Age, when the final battle and Elendil takes the ring, or Isildur takes the ring? Is that what happens to him? Is that he loses his physical form and he basically becomes this ghost that's trapped, and he's forever trying to figure out some way to come back?
Between the Second Age and Third Age?
Well, like at some point, Sauron gets defeated and the ring is cut from his hand. And then from then on, he's just like a ghost, right? He's not physically present.
But he is able to reform himself. So here's, I really like your question, Dan, because here's what makes me think about it. And I hadn't thought about this until you said it. This encounter where Sauron is defeated by Luthien and Huan has to be one of the defining defeats of his life. Like it's it's a personal defeat. And what is the defining moment of that defeat? Luthien threatens to strip him forever of his form so that he can never reform and have a body. So now fast forward a few thousand years. What does Sauron do after Morgoth's gone and he's the new Dark Lord? He forges a ring which will ensure that if he's ever stripped of his body, he can always come back to Middle-earth and reform a new body, albeit very slowly. So he puts some of his power, a substantial amount of his power, into the ring so that there's always an anchor to Middle-earth, drawing his spirit back and allowing him to slowly reform, which is what he does in Dol Guldur, where he becomes the necromancer slowly over time and then reveals himself as Sauron once enough time has passed. Takes him a long time, but the ring does what it's supposed to. And I think you could read the ring as a kind of coping answer to this personal defeat that we just read about at the hands of Luthien.
So he needs some sort of physical tie to Middle-earth.
I mean, the ring has part of himself in it. That's why he's able to come back to Middle-earth. That's stated in a variety of different ways.
Right, yes.
He doesn't want to go back to the Pac-man holding cell.
No, the Pac-man holding cell, which is where Morgoth eventually ends up, is like Morgoth's just this big set of eyes that never gets to reform in the timeless void, sitting there. Oh, that's awesome, Dan. Yes, the timeless void as the Pac-man holding cell. This is it.
Songs are like the big power pellets of Middle-earth.
And that also reminded me. So like when in Lord of the Rings, when Saruman is finally killed, there's a text in there where it says that like his spirit kind of rises like a cloud and it looks west, and then it turns around because it can't go that way.
Well, the wind blows it away.
Yeah, the wind blows it away, but like it looks like it's longing to go to the blessed realm.
Absolutely,
and it can't. So it's like, I wonder that's what Sauron's worried about. Like he would lose his body, and he would just float as like this spirit that can't find rest anywhere.
Yep,
that would make sense. Yeah. Maybe we should have cut this episode into 6 parts and not 3. We're moving on.
There's too much.
I'm going to move us on from this here. So at this point, Beren and Tunuviel went free again, and we learned that in Nargothrond, the folks they lamented that Felagund was no longer their king, so they essentially cast out Celegorm and Curufin. They take on Orodreth as their new king because I guess they know at this point, that Felagund is no longer alive. They would have known that at this point. And again, I love the line, "Let it be so." When they cast him out, said Celegorm, and there was a light of menace in his eyes. But Curufin smiled. I'm like, again, the smile. Like whoever in the movie they make of this at some point, the smile of Curufin is going to have to be.
They're going to have to come up with someone with a really good smile, like a Willem Dafoe smile, but an elvish Willem Dafoe.
That would be scary. So with that, they leave. They are reputed, and Huan still follows Celegorm, surprisingly, after all that.
Again, but you know what's funny is it says that yet their love, but Huan being faithful went back to Celegorm as master. Yet their love was less than before. Really, like right after he freed Luthien from that captivity. Who could think?
It makes you wonder if Celegorm was kind of like, Huan, you're still here, huh? That makes me really uncomfortable. He's following me around. He's like,
that's actually
over
true.
His shoulder.
You could read it that way. It's like, hey, why? But wait, you chose your side, and now you're back, and you're just watching me. What is going on? So we transition in this whole second part of the chapter that we've been reading. To go back to the beginning, we started with a rap battle, and then from rap battling we transitioned to Rapunzel story, and then from Rapunzel, some sort of torture porn of some kind, sadistic, getting eaten slowly by werewolves. And then straight up action sequence, magic battle, all kinds of epic sort of, straight out of something from Dungeons and Dragons. And then we've come back and we finish, or at least we finish this part with a WWF scene. This is my favorite. Jonathan, I'm trying to connect to our modern. Wait, that wasn't modern. That was kind of Gen X reference, but.
It's like Peter Jackson's Legolas when he mounts the horse by running and
them's fighting words,
wrapping around the horse.
Look, we know that you can actually leap probably 20 feet sideways with one jump because when you do, you get a title. It's called the Leap of Beren.
The Leap of Beren.
So anyway, for our listeners, basically, magically or not so magically, Curufin and Celegorm's path crosses with Beren and Luthien, and Beren and Luthien don't notice them, and they come running down. And actually, Celegorm was going to ride down Beren. Let's read the passage. Then Celegorm turned his horse and spurred it upon Beren, purposing to ride him down. But Curufin, swerving, stooped and lifted Luthien to his saddle, for he was a strong and cunning horseman. So you got to imagine Beren and Luthien are walking nearby, and Curufin reaches them first, grabs Luthien, swings her up onto his saddle, and his horse is blasting past. And then Beren, who's about to be trampled by Celegorm, does this sideways leap that Bruce Lee would be proud of, called ever after the Leap of Beren. Then Beren sprang from before Celegorm, so he's in front of Celegorm, full upon the speeding horse of Curufin that had already. So this is a horse that had passed him by, and the Leap of Beren is renowned among men and elves. He took Curufin by the throat from behind and hurled him backwards, and they fell to the ground together. So I'm thinking about the mechanics of this. So the horse has passed him by. It's got Luthien. He leaps sideways, and he grabs Curufin by the throat and takes him off the saddle, right? So what we're talking about here is a flying clothesline is what it is. Because his arm goes out, and he's doing this massive jump, Spider-Man jump, flying clothesline, takes Curufin off of his horse by the throat, it says. So that's a clothesline. And they go to the ground together, and then he starts throttling him. So this is just WWF right now. This is all. That's what we got here. He's choking him out.
Except it's real. WWF, not real. Lots of acting. Because death was near him. Celegorm came. He shot an arrow that was caught in Huan's mouth.
Yes, Huan does the mouth arrow catch thing. Yep.
Far better. Anyway, I won't say it. And then he shoots Beren. It strikes Beren in the chest, and Celegorm leaves, and Huan goes after him.
Now you actually jumped to the end.
You're right.
There's a middle part. Yeah. So Beren is going to throttle Curufin. Celegorm curses. There's a lot of cursing by the elves in this one. They keep cursing.
Kind of like in Home Alone.
And he's going to kill Beren, but Huan won't let him. So Huan is staring down the horse, and the horse won't go near Huan. And so Celegorm's useless. And so Curufin's going to die by throttling death, by sleeper hold from. But Luthien saves his life and prevents Beren from killing him. But Beren despoiled him of his gear and weapons and took his knife Angriest. That knife which will make a key appearance later on in the story. That knife was made by Telkar of Nagrod and hung sheathless by his side. Iron it would cleave as if it were green wood. Like if you could imagine a knife that can sort of whittle away iron if you want to. Then Beren, lifting Curufin, flung him from him and bade him walk now back to his noble kinsfolk, who might teach him to turn his valor to worthier use. Your horse, he said, I keep for the service of Luthien, that it may be accounted happy to be free of such a master. So not beyond a very noble insult following the final WWF move, because when it says, then Beren, lifting Curufin, flung him from him, Beren and Curufin are no doubt about the same size. Curufin may even be taller. So he can't lift up a person the same size up to your shoulders and just toss him. He clearly does an ultimate warrior thing. He's above the head, throwing or under the giant thing. Hulk Hogan, they've all done it. And throws Curufin. So, and then that's when Jonathan.
You got to think that The way Curufin and Celegorm feel by being bested by a mortal like Beren is probably a pretty deep cut, right? Like when he says then, put your valor to worthier use, to have that coming from a mortal man probably like strikes them poorly. Like on the inside, they have got to be writhing in absolute abject anger. And then he keeps his horse, and Curufin curses him under his death, and he says, "Go hence unto a swift and bitter death, because you're mortal." I like that. I like that. It probably means a whole lot more than just a curse about like, hey, turn your valor towards something worthier, but to have it coming from him.
Yeah, you have to think that these curses are more than just profanity. They have to be. They have to have that power. I think that's what you were saying, right, Jonathan?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but having it coming from a man, though. These
that's true
sons
too.
of Feanor, of the ones who were in Valinor and who burned the ships and did all these crazy things, to be bested by a single man who leaped and was able to clothesline him.
The flying clothesline.
I think about like he's straddling him and he's just like bam, 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 like left, right, like throttling him because he can't take it anymore. And maybe Luthien comes over and touches him and he's like, oh yeah, right. Okay, so put your valor to worthier use instead of me. Like,
yeah, he goes from WWF to nightly insults.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that that the leap of Beren is renowned among men and elves, but not the body slam of Beren. Because that's the cooler part, where he just lifts them up and just throws them. Like, that's awesome.
They should have had the leap, body slam, and throttling of Beren.
Oh man, it's great. It's great. So anyway, Curufin, as Jonathan points out, is really bitter. So he actually fires 2 arrows at Luthien. He's not trying to kill Beren. He's trying to kill Luthien, which is really interesting. Just serious malice and bitterness going on. And so Huan does the arrow catch with the jaws, like, a long time before anyone from Hollywood thought of such a thing. And then Beren catches the second arrow with his chest, like all the good Russian bullet stoppers of World War I and II. So he goes down, and Huan chases off the elves, but then he comes back with herbs from the forest, with which Luthien heals Beren. And then Beren repays her by leaving her.
Deserting her again.
But he's doing it, of course, because he loves her, doesn't want her to die, and he knows he has to go and try to get the Silmaril from Morgoth. He knows not how.
Yeah. I found this part interesting, where I think I wrote it down too, where they're finally reunited, and they're out of danger, and like Luthien has kind of like communicated to Beren that no matter what you choose, like it's up to you to choose. Either is this for the point where it's like you can keep your oath and face, probably certain death, or we can be just wanderers on the earth. But either way, I'm with you. I thought that was just like a really beautiful moment. That, like, for her, it was like I know for Beren, Luthien, just the fact that Luthien exists, that justifies like all of creation to him. He's like, this, like everything. If everything happens for a reason, it's to have Luthien be here. Mm-hmm. And for Luthien, it's like, no matter what you do, what you are, what you choose to become, like I'm going to stay with you. And I thought that was really beautiful. And
that's the only reason why Beren has to leave.
Yeah,
because he can't bear the thought of her dying. He can't, because he knows essentially and to hold his oath, he must go to something that is almost assuredly his death. And to have Luthien with him means that he would be bringing her along to that. And so he chooses not to. He chooses to depart while she yet slept upon the grass. But Huan knows he's left, right? He commits Huan to her care. And then Huan, being the single-minded individual that he is and doesn't actually listen to other people, he decides, nope, I'm going to be okay with carrying Luthien one more time. But this is after that song that Beren sang, where he essentially justifies all of creation. Mm-hmm. Just by the fact that Luthien walks the earth justifies everything in creation, everything that was good and bad, and just for her alone, is it worth it?
Yeah, very Romeo and Juliet vibe on that one.
Yeah. So okay, but she heard the song. That's the problem. She has great ears like elves do. Like this whole problem.
I don't know that there's a song that she can't hear.
Yeah.
This is Luthien we're talking about. She is
creation.
the song mistress. There's nothing that she can't do or hear with song.
It's kind of like Legolas's song. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard. Right? Like, so many people here. Maybe I'll link that below if you haven't seen it. You deserve.
Please don't. Please don't.
Man, it's better than Rings of Power.
Truly, much better. So she leaves. Huan carries him. Huan carries her. Huan, consenting once more to be her seed, borne her swiftly hard upon Beren's trail. And it's at this point that he takes on the ghastly Wolfheim of Draugluin. This is Luthien. No, I'm so confused. So the he here is Huan, and so Huan and Luthien, right? Am I reading this right? They take on the ghastly Wolfheim of Draugluin and the Batfell of Thuringwethil. Okay. And so they're able to essentially see their approach, or Beren sees their approach. He's dismayed. He thinks, "Oh crap, what's coming for me now?" But he wondered, for he heard the voice of Tinuviel, thinking that she was a phantom, that what he heard wasn't actually her, thinking that she was moving forward. But now she's joining him, and he's like, "Oh no, you're with me. Like it didn't work."
He's happy for a time and then is sad again. And here is Ted Nasmith's excellent painting of Thuringwethil, the form of Thuringwethil and Draugluin. So these, remember, for Tolkien, these are not half man, half bat vampires and half man, half wolf werewolves. These are full. They are full. Yep, they are full huge bats and full huge wolves.
And this is the first mention that we have of that
Thuringwethil, yeah.
Which is like, I guess, like almost Sauron's girlfriend.
Well, she's a messenger of his.
She's a messenger.
Yeah, and she's the chief amongst his vampires. And there's other places where there's fragments of what he wrote about Thuringwethil. Yeah, I mean, one could, no doubt, in the age of Game of Thrones, one could imagine, her being his girlfriend. But no, she's just one of his servants. Like he loves playing around with the forcing of evil spirits into monstrous animals, which that's the origin of the vampires and in Middle Earth. Not the bleeding throat vampire, but the vampires of Middle Earth are these massive bats with evil spirits in them.
I like, this is the second time then, right after this, that Huan speaks. And he makes the point that, you know what?
And boy, does he speak.
Yeah. No matter what you choose, Luthien will die, essentially is what he's saying.
Yep.
If you will not deny your doom, then either Luthien, being forsaken, must assuredly die alone, or she must with you challenge the fate that lies before you, hopeless yet not certain. So it's a Dumb and Dumber moment of like, if you go to Morgoth, there's a chance.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
Right? Otherwise, if she doesn't come with you, there's no chance. She's gone. She will die alone. Right. She will die unhappy, and at least with you, she has a purpose to be with you, to love you, to see your oath through.
Now, I might be misremembering things, but I know the movie is Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is obviously different than Tolkien, but it almost seems like he takes Beren and Luthien and makes that into Arwen and Aragorn in the movies, where it's like her life force is leaving her and she has to stick with Aragorn, or she's going to die either way. That's not explicit in Tolkien, is it? Between Aragorn and Arwen. It almost seems like that's more true here in Beren and Luthien, that it's her fate is decided, that she has decided to love you and her life is with you either way.
Yeah. So are you asking whether, because Beren and Luthien are the foreshadowing, or Aragorn and Arwen are a type of Beren and Luthien.
Right. Right.
for Tolkien. Are you asking whether that's reflected in this hopelessness of death without each other as well, or are you asking something else?
I guess what I was trying to get at was like when I read through Lord of the Rings, I didn't find it that explicit between Arwen and Aragorn, and I'm wondering if that connection is there too, like that Arwen, you know, she's given up her immortality for a mortal life, and Aragorn has to step up and be the king so that he can be with her.
Well, I think there are similarities and there are differences. I don't think that Tolkien's going to say that Aragorn and Arwen are exactly like Beren and Luthien. Beren and Luthien are clearly a much more the hopelessness is much more hopeless, and the tragedy and bliss is much more explicit in this tale than it is with Arwen. Is a very understated character. In fact, she came along very late in the writing of the Lord of the Rings. She was one of the last changes that he made to his script, the text, and so he clearly decided very late to have a type of Beren and Luthien in this story of the Lord of the Rings. So I don't think he's going to say that they're exactly the same, and he definitely doesn't make it clear that that's the case. At least I don't remember any passages.
Yeah, I think I feel like, man, and this might come, the things that I've read and I've seen might be flowing together between Peter Jackson and what Tolkien wrote. I think he might have been inspired to have Aragorn and Arwen because of Beren and Luthien, because he didn't know if he would ever be able to tell that story to everybody. So perhaps as a seed, right, of Beren and Luthien planted, this is what sprouted forth in the Lord of the Rings. But I don't, the playing up of that, Arwen's going to die if like the life is leaving her, unless I guess Aragorn loves her. I don't even remember that. I haven't seen the movies in probably more than a decade. So I don't remember
that part is definitely played up. That's not in the text. Only thing that is in the text is that Arwen, there's this great sadness because she's choosing this life to live with Aragorn.
Yes. Yeah.
If only she would have had Frodo's mithril coat to wear, she would have been perfectly fine.
Stop.
I mean, look, it was there all the time. It was like 3 rooms over from her bedroom in Bilbo's bedroom.
And why didn't the Eagles bring it to her?
Maybe that's what. Maybe they would like get Bilbo to fall asleep in the Hall of Fire a lot, and they would go over. And they'd go into his room and stroke the mithril.
Sorry, everybody.
We're going to have so many people so confused.
Anytime. Okay, again, mithril, the Rings of Power, is a big problem, and I'll leave it at that. Let's move on. So we're going to move on into the third part of Beren and Luthien. Like I said, this would be a long time. So we're not even going to do an If You Like Tolkien here. So if you like Tolkien, go ahead and keep reading the next part of this chapter. So we're ending at the one break we see where the line here ends. Then howling under the moon, he leaped down the hill in the bat wheel and flitted above. And this is where Werewolf Beren, Luthien Draugluin, and
Bat Luthien and Wolf Beren.
Yes. And Huan is no longer with them. So sorry. I'm reading all these here, and I can't remember who's who and what's what in the paragraphs in front of me. So, and then we're going to read from there to the end of the chapter. We're going to go through the rest of it, finish it off next week, and debrief a little bit, I hope. Man, I don't know if we'll have the time. Maybe we'll have to save all that for our extended podcast. And then hopefully what I want to do is I want to have a live chat with all our patrons and talk about Beren and Luthien. Like, what did they get out of it? What things struck them? Because some of them have read it for the first time and some are reading it, for the 10th time again. But I feel like there's every time there's a little bit more. And I like the whole idea of like, how did they feel? Like we asked you, Dan, how did you feel about this here? And it seems the most fairy story kind of tale in the Silmarillion. And did they get that same sense? Because after the Ainulindale, this here feels not the same in any way, shape, or form. However, that's fine, and that's the way Tolkien wrote it, and I think that's okay. So we're going to move on into that. We are going to actually also move on into our patron section, our extended podcast, where we're going to talk about a couple things about the Silmarils and the One Ring, and how Tolkien uses words in turns of phrase that we might see are more than they actually mean. So join us there. You can go to theonering.com/patron. $4 a month. First month is free. I know I say it every week, but in the chance that, the few dozen, 150,000 of you that hear this for the first time, go there, check it out. Join us. It's free for a month, and then you can just cancel if you don't like it. So if our conversation is boring in Discord, if our live chats are not what you want to hear or see, because sometimes we have faces made for radio, even though we're on YouTube,
Tactical error.
You don't have to give us any money for that, but we do enjoy it. Like the costs associated for it right now are nearly covering all the costs of things like StreamYard and the podcasting and the hosting and all that sort of stuff. So we would love to do more and to get more events in place and to do more things like live streams and stuff like that. But we have to be able to justify it with actual like reasons that our family are like, so why are you doing this again? Why are you spending all this time with the podcasting and it's not doing anything? So anyway, and Dan needs to get his walls repaired in his place. Stupid floods in California.
Yeah. Give us money. Give us all your money.
And then you get to hear the extended podcast. But hey, if you don't want it, it's fine. So
or,
anyway,
keep listening to us for free.
Yeah.
That's a thing too.
That is a thing. Or watching.
You could do that. We won't hold it against you.
No, just a little bit. No, it's cool. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. And
Bye, freeloaders.
Finish off Beren and Luthien.
Yes.